Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for the time to join together with our fellow club members. Thank you for those who can't be with us. We ask that you be with them and all that they do and guard and protect them. We thank you for keeping watch over us through the recent winter event. Pray that those who suffered from the ill effects of that have been able to recover. Just ask that you keep watch over the rest of us as we emerge from that and move forward. I ask that you bless those who serve and protect us and did so through the rough winter week a week ago. We pray for the family of our fallen officer, Mitchell Penton. We ask that you be with them, provide comfort and peace to them. And we thank you for putting the call of service on Officer Penton's heart. And we thank you for the sacrifice that he made. We pray that you would bless those, our elected officials in leadership positions at the local, state, and national level. Continue to guide the decisions that they make for the betterment of our city, state, and nation. Thank you again for those who are joining us on the call this morning, and we pray that you would be with us and bless our time this morning in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, I've got a few announcements, and then we'll move into our meeting. You heard me mention Officer Penton during our invocation. Bill Boyd and I went to the vigil at the substation Friday week ago for Officer Penton. It was a really nice event. Learned a lot about Officer Penton that we didn't know previously, and just what an impact he had made in a very short time with the force. And I'm going to give Mr. Boyd a minute, if he wants. You can wave me off, to talk about something that we'd like to do as a club for the Penton family.
Good morning, Lake Highlands. So one of the things that the Northeast is doing, Officer Penton's wife is very pregnant. I'm not sure when, next month or so we'll be having their first kid, is that they are doing a gift card drive. So what we would like to do is do a virtual pass of the hat this morning. No, it's easier when we're at the club, but unfortunately that's not the case here. Do a virtual pass the hat, and then we will buy a gift card on behalf of the club with all of those funds. So I'm going to put down in chat, I'm going to put my Venmo and my PayPal ways to send money there. Doug also said that we can do a check, and he will take the money that comes in the forms of checks and deposit those and get a card that way. Doug, do you want to comment on how to get those to you?
Yeah, actually the checks there's a link that was actually, maybe you can forward the link to everybody for the drive that came from the police department that you had on Twitter. But anyway, there's either making payments to the accounts that Bill is going to mention in the chat, or you can make checks payable to assist the officer and put Mitchell Penton's name in the memo. And then I can collect all those checks, and I'll also collect the gift cards and deliver that to the police station. So next Thursday, they're doing a drive-through collection of gift cards and checks. I'll put in the chat my home address. If you want to do a check, you can mail it to me, or you can drop it off at my house, and then I'll be the collection point for all of that.
Yep. And I've got my Venmo and my PayPal are both in the chat now, as well as a link to the Twitter post where they've got the announcement. And the board's already talking about what we can do to help honor this officer. He definitely seems like someone who would have been on our police officer of the quarter at some point. He's, like Chris said, was obviously very, very well liked from command on down to his fellow staff officers. So that's what I got. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, I would encourage y'all to jump on and get some money, either through Bill or through Doug, to help the family. seems like a good thing to do for a good guy who died doing what he loved, but serving and protecting us for sure. And we'd like to do what we can for them. So thank you, Bill. Thank you, Doug. Other news, we've got an update on our spring fundraiser, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Trefone.
Good morning, Lake Highlands. So a few weeks ago, we made the announcement that we were trying to do an in-person event, and we had some pretty exciting things lined up. But after some debate discussion, we feel that an in-person event is still just not the prudent thing to do. As Barrio said, his son-in-law's company may make his position remote forever. So a lot of companies are still not quite comfortable going back in person, and the pulse is similar around the community, that everybody wants to be back in person, but it's just not quite the time yet. So excuse me. So with that, we're switching up the event to a spring virtual fundraiser. So it's still May 22nd. So mark your calendars. I wanted to quickly just kind of go over my committee. So you can, if you know them, you could reach out to help. But Joe Parisi is handling our technology. So he'll be the guy kind of running the behind the scenes auction. So if you guys were there last year, you could bid virtually. So he'll be managing all of that. We have Adam McGill, who's doing our marketing and communications plan. Wes Johnston, who's doing our sponsorship committee. So we'll be reaching out for some help here soon. And then last, Steve Combest is doing the auction component. So that includes the live auction, the silent auction, and any other sort of raffles that we do. Anyhow, that's my team, and they have their own subcommittees that they have formed. But again, we'll be reaching out soon with more information and asking the club to help, because this is our big event in the spring. It's kind of what we use to fund the, with Oktoberfest, it's what we use to fund the scholarships and our grants. So it's important as ever. There's a lot of need out there. We want to do the best we can to support the community. So again, mark your calendars, virtual event, May 22nd, more information to come, but we're excited, and we're going to make the most of it. Chris,
excellent. Thanks, Nathan. Yeah, the auction committee has been working hard and kind of having to pivot one way and pivot the next over the past couple of months. Nathan and his group did have quite the event planned. It was going to be an indoor event at Gillies with a great headliner, musician, artist, that would have been a real draw for our community, really, for citywide, really, and would have been a great event. But as Nathan said, doing an indoor in-person event just didn't seem like something that we could feasibly do as early as May. We're kind of hearing that outdoor events are looking more and more possible for the fall. So we're, hoping that we can have an Oktoberfest again this year, but, jury's still out on that. For those who were on the Zoom a couple of weeks ago when we had the Dallas Children's Theater, they noted that they weren't doing any in-person events until, I think, December of this year at the earliest. So those were some things that we considered and that Nathan's committee considered in making the decision. I think it's the right decision, and just encourage you to keep your eyes open for future updates about items, format for the event, things like that. But definitely keep May 22nd on your calendars. It will be a fun event. We're going to do it virtual, but with the kind of similar setup that we had last year, where you can see all the participants on the Zoom and kind of have a fun, engaging event that way. And I definitely think there'll be some very enticing auction items for folks. So thank you, guys. All right, I see Principal Jones is on the Zoom, so I'll open the floor for a moment for a quick update from the high school.
Hi, good morning. Just one big piece of news to share. Our basketball boys are playing in the regionals tomorrow. We beat Capel last night and became area champions. And then we beat Arlington on Tuesday night to be by district champions. So we're very, very excited for them, and we'll be playing tomorrow at 3:30 at Berkner. We're playing Jesuit. So this will be the third time we've played Jesuit. So we're excited about that.
Excellent. Trying to find the unmute button here.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, you're good.
Congratulations to the boys basketball team. I've been kind of following their rise, and another matchup against the Rangers tomorrow, and should be a really, really fantastic game.
Yep.
So good luck to them.
Yep, we're excited.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I did not ask if there were any guests, but I'll pause for a moment. I've scrolled through the list and I don't see any names that I don't recognize, but if you happen to be on or have someone with you, just jump in and let us recognize them real quick. All right. Well, thanks again for those who have joined. I'm going to do the speaker introduction this morning. I know our director of programs is on the call, but he's tied up with work, and I'm going to stand in inadequately, I'm sure. But I'm proud to introduce friend and neighbor, John Turner, our state rep in Austin for District 114. John serving in his second term in Austin. Hopefully the second of many more to come if he's willing to continue in that role. I think he's done a fantastic job, and I'm looking forward to hearing his update on what is becoming an ever increasingly challenging and full legislative session. There were already some big items that the legislature was having to address this year or this session, and then the winter storm hit, and now they're having emergency hearings on what happened with the electrical grid and what needs to happen going forward. So John needs very little introduction to this group, so I'm going to turn the mic over to him and let him give us his update. Thank you, John.
Well, thank you, Chris, and good morning, everyone. I really appreciate the chance to join you this morning and talk about what's happening so far in the legislature. When we first talked about having this update on this date, we were concerned of whether there would really be much to talk about. It turns out there is plenty to talk about. The truth is, the legislature hasn't done too much so far, but the challenges for the session are becoming very clear. And of course, the big one now that has moved into the foreground is the winter storm response. And I'll just say I've been able to talk with some people. I know probably everyone on the call has stories to tell about what you went through. I hope everybody is doing well at this point, but I know that wasn't a pleasant experience. And still a lot of needs in the district and the community. Then we're doing our best to try to help. But obviously, this has become a major issue for our state. We do not want to repeat what happened during last week. I thought I would just give you an update on the legislature. I do have a PowerPoint. I'm going to try to share my screen. I hope that will work. Let me try it here in a second. I'm going to go through that quickly, really, because I'd like to reserve some time just to hear what's on your mind and to take questions and to just have a discussion. I really, this is a interesting and challenging session, and I'm very open to input from everyone on some of these issues we're facing. So let me see if this works. All right, I'm hoping that people can see the PowerPoint at this point.
Sure can.
Okay. Very good. Well, let me go through and give you an update on some of the big issues. And starting from the big picture here, the truth is, at the beginning of this session, there wasn't quite the same sort of theme to the legislative session that we saw last time in my first term down there. Last time, it was really going to be a session about school funding, and everybody knew that was a major priority and a mission from the beginning. There really wasn't the same sort of theme announced by the legislature as a whole, by the leadership in the legislature for this one. But we do know what two of the biggest challenges are. Obviously, dominating everything really was the pandemic, which affected so many areas of state government, virtually every committee in the Texas House and Senate. It has pandemic items that it must deal with. And now the response to the winter storm has become the other dominant issue. And I thought today I would just talk about, first of all, what's going on in the legislature regarding the storm, the review of what happened, the response, the reforms that are going to be necessary. Then talk about where we stand and some of the big COVID-19 issues, including the vaccine. Talk a little about our state budget, and then briefly about everything else. And there's still plenty of other issues up for debate. If we look at the winter storm, I mean, it's gradually just becoming more and more apparent what a major event this was, what a historic event really it was. Right now, we know statewide of at least 40 deaths, but truly that number seems to be, changing by the day. I don't know what the final tally will be. These are deaths from cold, from hypothermia exposure, carbon monoxide poisoning, a variety of, cascading problems and events that resulted from this unprecedented event. And then I don't have to tell you, millions were without power and heat or water for days. The economic cost is not yet known, but we're clearly seeing numbers in the billions. Some indications were this could be a larger than hurricanes in the state of Texas if you finally tally the total economic cost. I don't know yet, so all we know is it's enormous and it will be in the billions. And we still are dealing with a lot of immediate issues that have resulted from the storm, even though power is back on. We're still having people that don't have water. By the way, if any of you know of a family or someone who is especially struggling, they need help somehow, they're not getting it related to water, busted pipes, please feel free to let me know. And I'm trying to do what we can to help people one by one if necessary. We're probably going to do some wellness calls this weekend. Actually, I'll send out a communication about that if we were able to put that together. But I know especially in the Vickery Meadow area that some of the apartment complexes had not had water at last time I checked about a day ago. I'm hoping to get an update on that soon. And then we have the insurance claims process underway for the millions of people who had some level of property damage, busted pipes and related problems. We do have a federal disaster declaration, both for public aid and individual aid to provide aid to people that have experienced uninsured property losses. We're going to have agricultural effects. I heard in the beginning of the meeting already some discussion about electric bills. Those who were on plans that were exposed to the fluctuating price obviously received an unpleasant surprise when that wholesale price shot up to levels that probably no one realized, or very few who weren't insiders in this area really understood was even possible. And frankly, the other financial implications of what happened in various industries that we probably don't even fully appreciate yet, but we'll have to watch. And so really for the legislature, the way I look at this, it's important for us to try to first just really understand what happened exactly, almost if you put it on a timeline step by step during this week. That process has begun. We had hearings yesterday, both in the House and the Senate, that went all day long from about 9 a.m. to midnight, I think without a break in the House. Now, those were just for two committees, the State Affairs and Energy Resources Committee, and they did not permit any members who aren't on those two committees to participate. So I wasn't on those committees, but I monitored what happened. And of course, I'm trying to be in touch with this process. So far, there seems to be some level of consensus emerging around a few things. One, that winterization of infrastructure is necessary. And really, I'm referring there not only to the power plants, but also to the natural gas infrastructure that supplies fuel to those plants. And it appears there's going to be a lot more we can do there. The details are going to have to be worked out. Is this going to be a specific mandate from the state? Is it going to be really put in statute exactly what they have to do? Or is there going to be some direction to an agency to come up with those standards? Are they going to match federal standards? Are they going to match standards in other states? And then importantly, who's going to pay for that? Is that going to be something that public funds are used to assist? Maybe that is a possibility. I saw even at the federal level, Senator Cornyn apparently is looking at legislation that might provide federal aid to winterize infrastructure in Texas. The other possibilities, it could be some form of additional charge that it goes into the system as a whole that ultimately is borne in part by all users of the system. I don't know. That's something that has to really be discussed, I think, and evaluated. And then the question about changes to the entire structure of the electricity market. There are questions about our generation mix. Does it need to go further in one direction or another? Obviously, we had the largest amount of the lost generation came from the natural gas sector, which didn't work for a variety of reasons. And again, we're still trying to get to the bottom of that. Now, you know, that's a very important component of our electrical system. And, you know, some would say, well, we've got to go further in one direction or another direction. Some would say, well, we need maybe to consider additional coal as base load. Others talk about different kinds of additional renewable options. Others maybe say that the problem isn't the mix of generation on the system at all. It's just the incentives that are present in the system. There is a lot of discussion right now about whether we should move to a bit more of a hybrid market where we are paying generators for having capacity available, which we do not currently do in Texas. You know, we're what's known as an energy only market. Very few places in the world are that. Where we are only paying for the energy actually generated and produced, and do not pay anyone to just keep reserve capacity on hand. Maybe we need a higher or a true capacity margin, and are actually going to pay for that. Those are the types of discussions that are out there. And the questions about what to do about retail. Of course, we live under deregulation in Texas. All kinds of debates now about whether that has really worked for our state. You know, I think it's unlikely that we're going to move truly, you know, back to a full regulated model, but there is certainly some discussion out there about whether some additional adjustment to the retail sector may be needed. There are already discussions about whether we should not allow variable or indexed or market price exposed plans for retail electricity. And then there are questions about what to do about our operator, ERCOT. The ERCOT CEO was on the hot seat yesterday. Some are calling for resignations from either ERCOT or the Public Utility Commission. Different regulatory authority there. All kinds of ideas being debated. And then, of course, you probably read about the question of new connections to the national grid. Is it even a good idea for us to be as separated as we are in Texas and have only limited interconnection to national grids? A lot of people have been very understandably upset and concerned about, wait a minute, you know, my neighbors had power and I did not. My neighborhood did not have power, but the next one over did. Was this done fairly? It's interesting, by the way. Certainly we need to get to the bottom of that, and that's a priority for me. I think we did hear some interesting testimony about that yesterday from Alan Nye, the CEO of Encore. You know, certainly that's the transmission provider in our area. And if you want to go hear what he had to say, if you go to the link on the Texas House website that gives you video access to hearings, and you want to watch his testimony yesterday, which was probably beginning at about, I want to say 3 o'clock. It's a long, it may not be the easiest thing to find, but if you can't find it, let me know. We'll point you to it directly. He talked about how those decisions were made. And I thought it was interesting. And I think, you know, I learned something by listening to him about certain lines that are present, basically that are prioritized in order to maintain the stability of the grid as a whole, that can be different, even, you know, one street from another, that are kind of evenly dispersed all through the city. He really did maintain strongly that Encore tried to be as equitable as possible in what they did, inevitably because of the system stability issues, and also the need to keep on feeder lines for major infrastructure like hospitals. There were areas that maintained power while others did not. I thought he had a pretty decent explanation of that. I'm not going to be able to recapitulate it here very well, but it is probably worth listening to if you're interested in that. And that's something I'm going to try to summarize and communicate out to the district here in the near future also. And then we have the issue of electric bills, skyrocketing bills that we're going to have to decide if some sort of relief or reform is necessary there. So I'll move on to COVID-19 and talk about that for a moment. It hadn't gone away. We're still in the middle of the other great disaster here, this pandemic that has taken 40,000 plus lives in Texas and now over 500,000 nationwide. We in Texas, unfortunately, we're lagging right now in our comparative vaccination rates compared to other states. We were already behind other states, and then the winter storm hit last week, and so we're now further behind. Hopefully, we'll be able to catch up. We're I think working on it and trying to make progress. A couple of other important issues here that I've been focused on a little bit recently. In Texas, we still have not expanded the eligibility criteria to most kinds of non-healthcare essential workers. So, teachers, first responders, grocery workers in Texas are still not eligible on the basis of their jobs. Now, if they fit into one of the other categories, being over 65 or having a qualifying medical condition, then they can receive the vaccine, but not on the basis of being a teacher or a grocery worker or a first responder. And frankly, my view is it's time we expanded in Texas to cover them on that basis for various reasons. I put those reasons in a letter and sent them just a couple of days ago to the expert vaccine allocation panel, this group of 17 officials that are evaluating these questions and making recommendations. I just think it's time that we expanded in Texas. We are kind of an outlier, truly an outlier, in fact, in that respect at this point in time. We also had, as you may have seen recently, a controversy here for Dallas County because we opened up federal vaccine hubs through FEMA. And then the state Department of State Health Services and the vaccine allocation panel took away essentially an equivalent number of vaccines from our allocation that comes through the state. And, at first I thought surely there was some fairness to that. They wouldn't do something just, arbitrarily unfair, would they? Well, as I've looked into it, I have become convinced it really was not a justified decision on their part, in my opinion, for a whole lot of reasons. I'm not sure that the math they were using was truly reflective of where we are in Dallas compared to certain other regions. And I guess maybe more to the point, there really wouldn't have been any reason to open up a federal hub if you were just going to go ahead and take away the equivalent number of vaccines that were already being run through the state hubs. Now, I think there is going to be some adjustment here. I think they've already announced that they're not going to completely zero out our allocations from the state for coming weeks. And so hopefully there will be some level of adjustment that addresses that concern to some degree. But I think we're going to have to keep on working on it, keep on advocating. The truth is those federal centers had to be set up for a purpose, and that was because this is a high need area. We're behind, we need to catch up, and they were set up for certain zip codes where there was a particular judged to be a particular need. And that was the purpose that those federal centers were intended to address, the federal hubs. So that's going to be an ongoing issue. Let me talk about the state budget for just a second. Yes, we still have other issues going on, and one of the biggest is the state budget. That process has begun. The relevant committees are starting to go through the budget and have hearings and testimony. A few weeks back, versions of House and Senate budgets were introduced, and they were actually pretty similar, which is not always the case in many sessions, but this time it was. And there's some good news there, in my opinion. The budgets do maintain the level of per student funding for public education, which was increased significantly in the last session through House Bill 3. And so the current base budgets maintain that level of funding. And the real concern several months ago was whether we were going to even be able to maintain that level given what was happening economically and the recession resulting from COVID. But for a variety of reasons, bounced back a little bit and the revenue situation looks better. A hot issue, though, right at the moment is, if you've been following this question, you're familiar with what's going on. For the moment, school districts have not lost funds on the basis of the lower number of students who have been in attendance this year. In Texas, we fund schools based on attendance, not enrollment. And some people say we should change that, but currently that's what we do. And the fact that we've lost a whole lot of kids in our system during COVID, and especially a lot of young kids at the pre-K, K level, means that if you didn't have a sort of a hold harmless mechanism, districts would be losing a lot of money even now this year. But so far, we haven't received clarification about whether this hold harmless waiver, if you will, of the ADA rule will continue into the remainder of this school year. And it's actually putting our districts in a tough position budget-wise. And I'm advocating, as are a whole lot of other legislators, to extend this hold harmless funding. It just seems like a terrible time for districts to have to even potentially look at layoffs or serious budget cuts. I hope that's going to be extended. I'm working on it, continuing to advocate for it. Some people say, well, the districts need an incentive to go out and find these kids and get them back in school. Well, I agree that that we want to get those kids back in school. The truth is, though, the districts I'm working with and talking to, like in this district, Dallas ISD, Richardson ISD, are both working very hard at that. And in fact, it's they're spending money to do that. It seems like a tough position for them to be penalized just because ultimately we cannot find the same number of kids and get them back. In fact, we need funding to be able to continue to reach out and of course, address all the problems districts have resulting from this pandemic. In other respects, the budget is, just speaking very, very generally here, kind of at the same levels we have been recently in higher education, in health and human services, but we have to acknowledge that that's really only possible by virtue of the fact that we've received a lot of federal help already through federal COVID relief this last year. And as I'll go on to the next slide, that continues to be a possible source of help. One problem with the budgets is that we currently have a budget that proposes to spend more money than we are estimated to take in state revenues. We've got about a $7 billion gap right now. And again, that's not typical to begin a budget, proposed budget that way. But that's where we are. And I think there's a reason for that. There's a belief that it's going to be possible to close that $7 billion gap. And I put a few possibilities here. One, the comptroller has had to try to be somewhat conservative with this estimate of revenue. It may be by the time we get into April, May, the comptroller will be able to estimate that we're going to do better and we are going to make up that gap through increased revenue projections. And we're waiting for the federal government to decide what to do about this latest large stimulus bill. It is expected to pass, but the final amount of aid we might get is still unknown. And so we're going to wait and see, but that might help close the gap. And then we have our rainy day fund still there. Right now, over $9 billion. I think it would be over $11 billion if we don't withdraw anything from it by the end of this fiscal year. That's a possibility. And there are various other things that could happen, and including the possibility of actual just cuts as this budget goes through the process. You know, in the last session, the spending actually increased as the budget went through the appropriations process compared to where it started. This year, that doesn't seem likely. We'll see if there may be any cuts that are made. And then there are just a whole bunch of other issues. Any of these I could probably, we could talk about for the entire time I have with you. But these are items that have been proposed by one group or another. Most that I'm listing here are probably more in the category of issues that are going to be partisan. There will be partisan divides on many of these issues. COVID-19 immunity protections. There was just a bill introduced yesterday. I finally saw that addressed that question. That'll be a hot topic. Elections will be a hot topic. Several abortion bills will be debated. Public entity lobbying, that seems to have been, that was an issue that was debated last session, nothing passed, basically trying to prohibit local governments, school districts, potentially cities, counties, especially for the advocates of it, from engaging lobbyists on a contract basis. And I have my own views about a lot of these issues. I probably don't have time to go into all of them, but I'll always be glad to discuss any of them with you. And of course, there will be plenty of headlines, I think, around some of the items on this list. So for my own part, I'm on the Higher Education and County Affairs committees. We do have committee assignments, and most committees haven't started to meet yet, but will soon. And I'm going to try to file a number of bills. I filed 9 bills last session. I'm going to try to file a few more individual bills this session. I was able to pass 4 last time, and I felt like that ratio was okay with me. There is a feeling, however, that the number of bills that actually get passed into law may be lower this time. We're going to have to see how that actually works. But some of the bills that I'm working on filing and preparing to file right now include the questions of our pandemic preparedness plans. I just filed a bill yesterday that directs the Department of State Health Services to do a vaccine awareness campaign, a kind of advertising and public relations campaign related to the COVID-19 vaccines. I won't go one by one through every one of these because I want to save a few minutes to hear from you. But these are some of the priorities that I'm hoping to file legislation on and see if I can move a few bills forward. So again, lots of big issues and then lots of individual issues to talk about, but I hope I've left a few minutes here just to hear your thoughts. I would love to hear what you're thinking and answer any of your questions in the remaining time I have. I, as always, appreciate your involvement, appreciate the opportunity to serve you down in Austin. I'll be working hard and doing my best, but I always love to hear from you. So I'll do that right now and pause. Thank you very much.
Hey, John, this is Bill Boyd. I have a couple, but I'll just start off with the big hitter with COVID. So our vaccine rates in the state are low, but I am technically 1B. I've signed up with Dallas County, Collin County, Tarrant County, and Denton County. And I am on all of those that I can see where I am on the wait list. I'm several 100,000 into the wait list, and they're in the tens of thousands and getting vaccine distributed. Is this a supply problem? Is it a distribution problem? Is it all of the above? Because it seems like the demand is there and the demand is not being met to get our vaccine numbers up.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. And I think the answer is it's mainly a supply problem. I think obviously we were hurt, the distribution efforts were hurt by the winter storm. And we had a bunch of bumps in the road, as you know, everybody knows who followed this, in getting distribution organized. At this point, it seems to me that mainly it's an issue of supply. Now, obviously, the issue I alluded to a moment ago, about the allocation to Dallas County, I really think it was wrong that they cut off allocations to Dallas County and Tarrant County. Those were the two counties they did it to after those federal sites opened up. The federal sites, as you know, probably are only for people in certain zip codes. Some in my district are in those zip codes, but most are not. That's not a good situation for, therefore for people in my district. There are only a few places in the whole state where no matter what category you fit into, if you live in a certain zip code, there's no vaccine being allocated for you right now. And that's just not right. So I'm working on that. But overall, Bill, it's an issue of the amount of vaccine that is being allocated to the state, period, in the first place. It's got to increase. They say it is going to increase. I think the current producers have just announced that they're able to accelerate their production. And then we're going to get, hopefully, another player in the mix, Johnson & Johnson, I think, soon. And I think that's the biggest problem at this point in time. And I hear you, and it's very frustrating. By the way, I don't know if you mentioned Kaufman County, I'm recommending to people to sign up in Kaufman County as well, to make that the fifth one. That I think, in fact, I believe you can sign up in that county regardless if you're 1A or 1B or not. Now, of course, if you're not 1A or 1B, you'll just be, put on the wait list in essence until that's available.
Thanks, sir.
Hey, John, this is Paul Elkier. I noticed on, I think your last slide, you had something about like street racing, which in my mind, I think of as a local issue, but you've got it there as, more of a state issue. And I'm just kind of wondering in general, how does legislation, how do things fall on local versus statewide? Who actually takes ownership of something like that and can do something on that?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Appreciate that question. In fact, so on street racing, lots of people locally and including the city itself have come to me and asked if I could carry legislation related to street racing. And really what we're talking about here, of course, this is the big organized events that y'all have been probably reading about or seeing that take over, streets and are quite dangerous. It's become this activity has accelerated all across the state recently. The real answer to the local versus state issue here is, anything that the development of any criminal offense, the designation of any criminal offense is always a state law issue. And so if our criminal statutes need to be adjusted for any reason, that's always a state law issue. The city did pass an ordinance, but that doesn't affect, the criminal prosecution of this offense. I actually just filed a bill on this issue, and it does a few things. One, it says that if a person has been convicted of street racing more than once, or if they were intoxicated while doing it, or if they injure or kill somebody while doing it, the vehicle can be forfeitable through the civil forfeiture proceeding in the same way that a vehicle can be forfeitable in a DWI situation. The city told me they believe that's an important tool that would help disincentivize this activity. Sometimes these vehicles are, they are souped up. Hundreds of thousands of dollars can be spent on these vehicles just for this purpose. We also added it to the list of, in this bill, this proposed bill, added to the list of offenses that can be prosecuted if it has a connection to organized crime, which law enforcement tells me they believe is the case for some of these activities. And so those are changes that I put in a bill. I welcome your input on it, but the city basically felt this was something they wanted help with, and that's why I have pursued that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or any other topics?
So, John, my other question is, happens to be a committee that you're on, higher education. I know that higher education is probably going to be on a back burner with these other huge issues that are popping up, but what are your thoughts on some reforms in that area? With all the talk on the federal level of loan forgiveness, which I personally am staunchly against. But, we obviously have some big problems in higher education, from redundancy to how giant the administrations have gotten the cost, et cetera. And, I'm looking at some hefty college costs coming down the road here in a few years. Are there any thoughts on any reforms on higher ed, or are the other issues just too big for that to be on the table this time?
Great question. Yeah. I do think that, just being realistic, the odds of any sort of significant changes to the system are probably pretty low this session, just because exactly what you said, there's so much else going on. It's going to be hard for, those other issues are going to take up a lot of the oxygen. But that said, they're always, the committee is not going to, do nothing. We're going to be open, I think, to hearing a few different ideas. I think particularly in the areas of, community college, trying to expand and strengthen the links between our K-12 system and our community college system, as we've really done quite effectively, I think, in Dallas. Expanding some of that statewide may be a priority. The question of funding is always there. And as I said, I think higher education will feel fortunate if it just kind of gets by with what it has now and does not experience further cuts. Most institutions had to find 5% to cut at the direction of the governor during the pandemic recession here. And so to get back to where they were, I think they'll appreciate that. I share a lot of your concerns, I think, about the question of loan forgiveness and how that is handled. That issue has to take into account, fairness, I think. And I'm not sure it's an issue we'll be debating specifically at the state level. Probably more of a federal one. But beyond that, really, this is also going to be a learning process for me now that I'm on this committee. I would love to hear thoughts from you and from anyone on the call about how you see the higher education system working. Clearly, just high cost is a major issue, and we all face that, thinking about college for our kids, and that's something that I think needs to be always prioritized as we think about our system.
Excellent questions, Mr. Boyd. John, thanks for those responses. I'm going to hit one on the winter storm and electrical outage issue real quick. You mentioned Alan Nye's testimony and kind of his explanation for what seemed like an inequitable distribution of the blackouts. I wondered if he alluded to any efforts that could be made to improve the distribution of those blackouts in the future, so that folks aren't experiencing, these long outages and others not experiencing any. I understand there are lines that have to be kept open, as you said, for essential services, but some way to make that distribution more equitable if we have an event like that in the future.
Yes, there was some discussion of that. Of course, the big solution to that in the first place is just not to lose so much generation capacity in the state. That's now exactly what first caused the generation capacity to trip off. That's something I really think we still need to get to the bottom of. Basically what you hear from generators is, well, we didn't have gas supplies. And the gas industry is saying, well, we didn't have electricity, so we couldn't, our compressor stations wouldn't work and we couldn't get it to you. It's a chicken and egg issue. I'm not sure we have the answer yet to really how it started and then how it cascaded as it did. But more to the point on your question though, Chris, I did hear something interesting yesterday that I think is worth following up on. Right now we do not allow our transmission distribution utilities like Oncor to do any kind of generation. And there are good reasons for that. I mean, our market structure is supposed to separate those functions. However, if Oncor had the ability to, with battery technology improving, with if you allowed Oncor or just ordinary generators, portable type generators, if you allowed Oncor to in some fashion be able to maintain a level of emergency only generation that is mobile, that they could put on a street or put in a neighborhood or near a business or hospital or something like that if it were necessary. I think maybe that actually would help the resilience of the system as a whole. Your hope is you never have to have these kinds of outages again in the first place because we fix things at the level of overall generation in the state. However, redundancy is important in a system, and I think I'm intrigued by this possibility of adjusting these prohibitions where you might allow the transmission distribution companies to be able to provide some level of emergency generation until the system as a whole is fixed. Beyond that, Chris, it sounded to me like, the places they have these feeder lines, I'm not sure if there's too much that can easily be done to adjust, the lines that will always stay on for system resiliency and to sort of preserve the stability of the grid as a whole. From what I gather, those lines are sort of there, and I don't know if it's going to be an easy thing to change where they are. So the next time there's this same level of outage, you may see the same thing happen again. Of course, we just hope we don't get to the same level of outage we had this time.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Appreciate it. All right. It's 5 past. I'll pause for 1 second. Any final questions for Representative Turner? All right. Yes. Round of applause. John, thank you very much for the update. Obviously a lot going on. Really appreciate your attentiveness to the issues that are going on in your district and bringing those to the attention of those in Austin. Look forward to hearing from you again in the future. And, appreciate you always having your door open and ears open to what we've got going on here. I would note for those of you who didn't see it, I think it got circulated through social media, but the Dallas Morning News did a great write-up on John back at the end of January. I would encourage you to hop onto their website. I may have missed it in the print edition, but it's definitely available online. You should check that out. Some other of our speakers that we've had over the past few years have recently been in the news, and I'll just plug them real quick. Daniel Roby with the Austin Street Center was recently recognized by Baylor University, received a very prestigious award from his alma mater that was circulated yesterday via The Advocate. That's a great recognition for his efforts. Daniel took over the Austin Street Shelter several years ago as executive officer and has done a fantastic job taking care of the homeless, finding them shelter in Dallas, and should rightfully be applauded for his efforts. He presented in December a couple of years ago with Wayne Walker, a former hometown friend of mine from Jacksonville, who runs Our Calling, which is not a homeless shelter, but provides a great deal of services to the homeless in Dallas County. And Wayne and Our Calling actually ran the emergency shelter at the Kay Bailey Hutchison Center during the winter storm Wayne's efforts and our Collings' efforts were recognized on the Today Show earlier this week. Got an extensive interview there. I encourage you to check that out. I'll try to get some links into the club's social media here this weekend. And then Katie Norris with Photolanthropy just released her latest documentary. I'm going to draw a blank on the name of it right now, but it's the story of the young man who was severely injured in the football game and has relearned how to walk and walk the stage at his graduation following that injury. She's a former Lake Highlands student from the high school and presented to us a couple of years ago about her documentary business with Photolanthropy, nonprofit work that she does. So just some things to check out as you're browsing the interwebs in whatever free time you might have. Again, thanks to Michael for setting up the program this morning. Thank you, Carrie, for the update on the high school. Bill, you had asked for a last second here at the end. I'll give you a minute.
Yes, I just wanted to update folks. So this morning we have raised almost $500 for our gift cards for Officer Pinton's family. I put my Venmo and PayPal back in chat here at the end, and also Doug's address if you want to drop off a check. So if anyone else would like to contribute, I know the family would greatly appreciate that, especially with the baby coming here soon. So thanks to everyone that contributed.
Excellent. Thank you, Bill. And thank you to those who have made donations. With that, unless someone else wants to raise their hand and jump in here at the last second. Not seeing anyone. John, thank you again very much. Best of luck through the rest of the session and possibly the extended session there to deal with redistricting, which we really didn't talk about, but is obviously of huge interest. So good luck with that. Thank you. And y'all have a great weekend.